It was just a supply which they had elected to insure to say if something happens to that supply that I'm dependent on, if it's a peril such as fire, flood, theft, whatever that we insure, happens to them that impacts potentially my revenues, I want to insure them.
Welcome to the business behind your business. Conversations to help your business grow and thrive. Hi, I'm Paul Sweeney, founder of Pretium Solutions, chartered accountants and certified business advisors, hosting the business behind your business. Right, welcome to the business behind your business, and welcome back to Dave Ferris. We had previously, we've talked about insurance and general insurances that a business owner might need, but today we're going to unpack, we're going to look at the topic of business interruption insurance and how that works. So welcome back, Dave.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
Dave's from DavelCorp and over 35 years of experience with insurance, so knows his stuff. Has been working with small and medium and larger businesses over this time, so well placed to talk about this topic of business interruption. Now, we've talked generally about it, and business interruption is one of those, types of insurance that business owners don't consider until they've had an event and they think they can claim. Yeah. So would that be fair?
Yeah, I guess it's not until you, I guess we've been involved with many claims, and we get to see a whole range of scenarios and how people respond to an incident. So as part of your risk management strategy is thinking of contingency plans post a loss. All right, so even forget insurance and think about your own contingency plans. If you weren't able to get access to your building, whether it's because there was a tenant in the same building suffered a misfortune and you just don't have access for 2 weeks to the building as a result of that, or you've lost a critical piece of machinery, or you've totally destroyed your premises and it doesn't exist anymore. These are the sort of things you need to sort of have a bit of a think about. What are your own contingency plans? What are your plans that you'd like to put in place if such a scenario arose? Then think about how the insurance can respond to help you achieve that.
Yep.
All right. So you could be a simple office, and the landlord has a really poor roof maintenance program, and you're continually having water damage such that eventually the roof collapses in the event of a storm, and you've got a unit that you cannot occupy. So what are you going to do? So if you've got your contingency mindset in place that says, we've already understand we're in the cloud, so all we need to do is we don't need another server. We can just access our technologies anywhere remotely. We need to empower our team to be remote and mobile. So that's a way, and so the insurance policy simply then says, well, I'm not going to lose revenue, but it's going to cost me a little bit more to operate. So I just want to insure my additional extra cost of working rather than insuring my profit, because I won't lose profit as soon as I'm set up somewhere else.
Yeah.
Rather than a manufacturer relying on a machine that fails, and we've had a serious claim in Melbourne was $3 million machinery caught fire. It took 2 years to replace it. So the whole idea is, can we operate on our other machines at spare capacity? Yes, but it's going to cost us more because we have to pay overtime for staff.
Yeah.
All right. Or we have to modify other machinery to enable us to do those runs. So you've already have to have a bit of a think about how you'd like your contingency plans to come into effect. And then the insurance then gets structured to respond so that you can be given a check to give you, to provide you funds to deliver on additional overtimes. Sometimes it could be you might set up in an alternative premises and you're going to run a little bus service to get the people from your place, which is right at the train station, to a new place a kilometre away. It's all about what's required to enable you to continue generating your revenues.
Right. And those are aspects I think a lot of business owners don't consider until the event happens. But I think it needs to be part of everybody's, I guess, at least an annual review of if something happened to our business, what do we need to do? And a lot of the time people, we always say that it won't happen to me because of X, Y, Z. Well, it might not happen to you, but it might happen to the guy in the office next to you. Yep. And we've seen a situation recently where an air conditioning unit failed and caused fire damage and there was smoke damage, not just in that immediate office, but the whole floor was unusable for 6 months.
Well, it's health reasons as well.
So it might not just be what's going to happen, go wrong in your business. It's what's happening outside of your business that you can't control, mitigating those risks. And we talked about manufacturing, but what about retail? How does that help? Because I know I've had a situation where a retailer had a street-facing entrance, and the council had decided to do some major roadworks and limited access to his shop for 3 months. So is that something that you can plan for in that sort of situation?
I guess generally the business interruption policy still requires a trigger for a loss, an insurable loss under the property policy. All right, and so if and they're very complex wordings, and there's a whole range of other little scenarios which actually aren't property damage related, but it could be closure by a public authority, it could be prevention of access, but these still relate to an insurable event. So think of the bushfires up in the Blue Mountains. If at the end of the day there's property damage being incurred all over the Blue Mountains and the authorities just say we're shutting down access to the Blue Mountains, even though your property is not damaged, but the authority has said we don't want anybody in there for a safety reason. As a result of the property damage, we're shutting down the suburb. You can't go in. So then that triggers the loss. All right. But if it's just in the scenario you prompted where they're just putting in new piping and there's no access, or they're, let's say, putting a tram railway down the middle of George Street in the city, it happens. There's still got to be an insurable trigger. All right. And so, but as a business, you've got to think of these contingencies. Have a bit of a think. I mean, okay, what would happen if? And don't just think the worst scenario being a major fire. Think of what could happen in our area. What could happen? Are we bushfire exposed? Are we flood exposed? Because you might not have a flood damage to your building, but the general area is damaged, and nobody can get in or out to your building. Suppliers can't deliver. Customers can't pick up. And so you're affected by a flood. So do you actually have flood cover as a trigger to prompt the business interruption?
Now, so you just touched on something there, talking about getting delivery from your supplier. But if you're heavily reliant on a particular supplier in your business, and something happens to that supplier, is that something that a business can insure for?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the largest, this is going back to the 90s, one of the largest suppliers' claims happened with a confectionery manufacturer in Lithgow who was dependent upon an essence of mint coming from Italy. And there was floods in Italy. That essence of mint, they can't use any other essence under this brand, couldn't be supplied. And so at that time, this is in the I think it was early 90s, it was a $3 million loss. And there was no property damage anywhere. It was just a supply which they had elected to insure, to say if something happens to that supply that I'm dependent on, if it's a peril such as fire, flood, theft, whatever that we insure, happens to them that impacts potentially my revenues, I want to insure that. And a lot of property policies enable that to happen. It doesn't have to be a $3 million loss, but it's called specified suppliers and customers extension. So if something happens to your customer even, and they're no longer buying from you because of a fire, then that's a trigger for your business interruption. So it's suppliers and customers. You can specify them, name them, and they'll be covered. There's also a lower limit typically available for unspecified suppliers and customers, where it's just, I hadn't anticipated these guys being affected or impacted, and I'm surprised they impacted my revenues. That's a trigger for a loss. Let's evaluate a claim.
So we're coming back to this issue of looking at and identifying what are the risks for your business. And I think really as a business owner, that's got to be a crucial step in your annual process, identifying what your risks are and not just insuring, but actually working on strategies in your business of how you're going to mitigate those risks. And
so a prudent insurance broker should not be selling policies unless they've undertaken a risk profile exercise with the client. We find in our discovery meetings, this is where most of the value is derived, because it's sort of like penny dropping moments when you're probing and talking just generally about the way they operate their business and where their customers are derived from, where the suppliers are, and understanding how they operate, what would happen in the event of a loss. And a lot of times they don't think about that. So you get them talking, and the next thing, you're developing risk matrices with them and determining whether we want to insure this or just manage the risk. And then at the end of the day, what's left is a desire to transfer what there's no tolerance to absorb themselves on their own balance sheet. So that hones in then, based on the scenarios, where you need to go and seek a risk transfer product or an insurance product to address that for the business. So it's a journey from understanding risk, how you want to manage that risk, and then in the case of a scenario, what sort of contingencies have you contemplated that we can then tailor the insurance to respond for you.
And so do business owners need to document that process or how they're going to manage their risk as part of this insurance process?
Look, it's ideal to do that because these documents, these contingency plan documents, evolve as we've seen this year. There are contingencies unfolding that people had not anticipated. So you've got to have a way of being able to respond. Boards do this. For entities. Smaller businesses need to have a way of engaging to keep this on people's radar, to say, okay, how are we responding? You develop a new customer, all of a sudden that customer becomes 80% of your business. And it's like, well, okay, how's that impacted my contingency planning? Yep. How are we going to manage if something happens to that customer? So contingency planning is really critical, as you've seen, even when you're talking about the criticality of individual operators in a business, key man from an operational point of view. What happens to that person if they're no longer with the business anymore? So it's part of this overall contingency planning is what would happen, what could happen, and then just putting a plan in place to ensure that the business is protected, so there's longevity and continuity. And
I think in terms of risk, like often you mentioned boards for small business owners or for any business owner, but in terms of risk, so if you're talking about it at a board level, you're often talking at it at different angles. And I'm thinking, well, in terms of risk, there's not just the insurance or the business insurance, but you mentioned key man, so you need your life and income insurance advice there. But the business lawyer could actually help you in structuring your contracts to sort of reduce your risk and working with your accountant to actually assess the financial impact. So more and more, what I'm seeing is that as a business owner, you're good at what you do, but you need that team of experts advising you to get the best outcome, so that you can actually concentrate on running your business. And I think that's the why we do these things as well.
And the beauty of this advisory board structure is that you have an issue that's presented by a business. And it needs to be addressed, that same issue needs to be addressed from a legal perspective, financial perspective, and a risk perspective. And to be able to say, okay, well, have we addressed these risks appropriately for my business? And who am I going to lean into for consistent advice about that? The answer comes through these board structures.
Absolutely. So that business interruption is a key thing in which is, we said it's often overlooked until people need to make a claim, but you can actually put in place a plan to help manage that risk or even determine how much that risk is that you're willing to accept yourself. Now, are there times when your insurance won't cover certain events? It's something that we've been asked a lot at the moment.
Look, typically, well, the answer is yes, all right, because it's not, there's no magic bullet with any policy, all right? So there's always exclusions, and that's completely separate to the idea of if there's been a non-disclosure to an insurer of what the business actually is and how they control their risk, they might decline based on misrepresentation or non-disclosure. So even if you have a policy in place, if it hasn't been communicated properly to the insurer when they quote, they still may look for an out. And to be honest, the Australian insurance industry at the moment it's a bit of a basket case. Profitability is low, capacity is hard to achieve, prices are increasing, excesses are increasing, and coverage is contracting. So it's a really tough environment. And so sadly, what's happening as well is insurers are denying claims and they wait for a response. And so that's generally, and so you need a broker then to actually go in and fight for you. So the other part of, instead of doing this yourself directly, but relying on an insurance advocate, is they fight for you in the event of a claim. All right.
And I'm guessing that as a broker, an experienced broker, so you've got 35 years experience in the industry, you're going to know the right way to approach this much better than me as a business owner who's gone off and done this myself on a website. So you're going to know the best approach. You're going to know what I need to do, what documentation I need to get to support my client. And that's where a lot of the value comes in of using a broker.
And I guess we as a company, we're in the business. Our business is about providing excellent risk and insurance advice that results in a superb claims outcome. At the end of the day, a superb claims outcome can only be achieved if you've done all the proper risk and placement strategies properly. Because if you put in an improper cover, you'll get a bad claims outcome. Right? If you've misaligned the risk and the policy and the limits and excesses, you're going to get an unhappy client come claim time. So the whole idea is do all that hard work, do all that risk profiling, identify the cover, collaboratively work with the client on the different solutions so that when a claim happens, there's no surprises. But if there is a surprise, because the insurance company's not playing game, then that's when you go in and fight hard. And unfortunately, we're finding we're having to do, not just us, but as an industry, we're having to fight insurers for a better claims response than their first initial decline.
I guess the other aspect of that is that when you're in a situation where you're having to claim, you've got a lot of distress and emotional issues to deal with at the time. The last thing you want to do with directly is an insurance company.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so people at claim time are very vulnerable. And so, as a broker, to be able to stand there and hold your client's hand as the place is burning or smouldering and say, it's under control, don't worry, leave it to us, we've got this with you, all right? It's comforting. Where clients have tried to save money by declaring lesser values than they should, we can't cope with that. It's something that we don't endorse at all, because we know when claims happen, the insurers roll out these punitive clauses called average clauses or co-insurance clauses, and it's an abominable insurer response to a client. But the penalty is correct because the client has not disclosed fully. All right. So from our client's point of view, what we try to do is make sure the clients up front have declared properly, responded to all the questions that we require for the insurer to understand. Insurers ask different questions on different classes, and we have to know that so that you get a superb claims outcome at the end.
Look, that's what we want to achieve. We don't want to be in a position where we need to claim, but if we do, we want to make sure that we've got everything prepared and we've got the right team working for us. So how do our listeners get in touch with you, Dave?
Well, I guess we go straight to the website. All the W's are riskybusiness.com.au.
Risky Business. So I think very topical, very easy to remember, Risky Business, and because we want to avoid or we want to manage our risks. So great
It doesn't have to be a risky business.
That's correct. So Dave, thanks for your time again today. So much more on this insurance topic to unpack, so we're going to get you back, and I think we're going to talk on cyber insurance in an upcoming episode, because I think that's also something that a lot of business owners are concerned about at the moment.
Good, excellent. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for listening. Do you have a question you'd like our team of experts to answer? If you do, send your question to podcast@thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. To hear more from The Business Behind Your Business, don't forget to subscribe using your favourite podcast player. Or you can visit the businessbehindyourbusiness.com website.